All right, well, welcome to Real Talk.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally?
This is an illusion.
Is this real life?
Is this real?
Welcome to
I need to know.
What is real? How do you define real?
Bienvenido.
accueillir.
You merely adopted the dark.
Welcome to Real Talk
Real Talk.
I was born in it.
with Shadow Walker.
What's on the agenda today? What is on? Yes. Thank you. Secretary? Very good. Chispa, Secretary, will be keeping us on agendas for today. I believe today's topic is going to be authenticity, as is appropriate, because we are talking about Real, the parent company of Real Talk. And I think I'm going to start off saying with that. Let's just give a little bit of context. Excuse me, that's my water. You have your own fountain. Thank you. But it's been quite a journey to get here, I'll say that. This is the very first episode of Real Talk, and we got to set some context. Obviously, you notice a lot of things that are a bit different than normal, and that's going to be a theme that you're going to see throughout this, because Real, as a company, has been founded around the idea of cultivating authenticity in humanity, and is also a values-first movement and lifestyle hype brand. And there's going to be a lot of things that go into that, and you'll start to understand more as we unpack it, but I'll try and get the message across as clearly as I can in this first episode. And it's quite simple. And so if we were to take the concept of a values-first company, well, you're going to ask the question of, well, what are those values? As I've already stated, authenticity is going to be a key and core component that you will see as a theme throughout everything that we do. In addition to that, the only other value that we really need to represent is right livelihood. And right livelihood is actually going to get its entirely own podcast episode here, I think, coming in on number 2. I think we're going to do values for the first 2 episodes. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. There's going to be a lot to catch everybody up on, because what you are looking at right now is the result of a lot of time and a lot of effort put in by a bunch of people, several of which are standing here behind the camera. So you'll be hearing a lot more about all of his various partners. But the man sitting in front of you, me, Ruben Walker, is but really a mouthpiece and a figurehead for an incredible team of people that are all aligned around the values that I've already spoken about and will continue to speak about at length. And one of the things you're going to learn very quickly about me is that speaking about topics at length is a specialty of mine. And part of what we hope to create in this little situation here is essentially a microcosm of what happens here at this house and all of the places that we operate out of on a regular daily basis. So this is our first effort at creating a situation to give you, the viewers, a window into the day-to-day life of what we think are these important issues in the world, and how we as a company, Real, can work proactively to combat them. And when it comes to authenticity, and I think a lot of people are going to feel me on this one, there are a lot of places in which we are going to need to give our attention. So, with all of that in mind, after a lot of deliberation and a huge range of ideas on where we wanted to start, we decided that talking about it would be a good place. And as we unpack the full scope of Real, what you're going to come to find is that talking about something is just the beginning. And as I like to say, it's all talk until it's not. And so this is a step in the direction of taking something from simply just talk into something that other people can experience. We want to bring people in on these conversations. Authenticity in itself probably rings a bell for you. And along with that bell, it's probably the echoing question of, what does that mean? And we are really interested in what that means to you. Because as a group of people, I think our team is probably 7 or 8 strong right now, and we spend a lot of time on the topic. There's a lot of late nights, which we're going to be looking at giving you guys windows into, so you can see more of those behind-the-scene conversations that have led to this moment right here. But in those deliberations, in those conversations, we have found that while we have a very clear idea of what authenticity means to us, we only represent a very small percentage of the world, clearly. And So then we have to start asking the question of, what does authenticity mean to everyone? What does authenticity mean to you? What does authenticity mean to the people around you? Do we even have a collective idea of what authenticity is? And I have spent, I think now, months talking about this topic. And I have a lot of fun tools and various things that I get to introduce you to help think about it. And the hope for me would be that, if we had a goal of this episode, it would really be to spark the inquiry of what is authenticity. And kind of the first topic, or the first tool that I've created over the last several months that comes to mind for me when it comes to authenticity is something that I refer to as Callum's hat. And I love being able to bring this up because Callum is a member of our community down here. We're in Costa Rica, hence the beautiful backdrop behind me. This is actually, we're filming this podcast episode here at our house, which I refer to as Tantos, which you can also translate into a lot or even too much in Spanish. And while I wish that I could conduct a episode fully in Spanish, I'm going to have to bring in some help for that. So that'll come down later on the road. But we're certainly going to want to be looking at tackling these things in various languages. So please do make sure to stand by for that. And if you're having a hard time understanding, help us communicate better. Help us get the message across, because there's a couple of things here that need to cross from the ideas that we have into whatever language you understand, whether it's a literal language from English to Spanish, or it is simply demonstrated in visuals. Everyone learns in different ways. These are all things that we're exploring. And while we don't have all the answers, we certainly have a lot of topics that we want to address. And we know that we can't be the ones that come up with all the answers. But I digress. Let me go back. Callum's hat. So Callum is a member of our community, and he's a young man. I think he's encroaching on that 30-year mark. And being 36 myself, having just turned 36 last Wednesday, I can definitely say that 30 is that point in a man's life, or I'll speak for myself, at least in my life, where I started to go, my God, I hope that I have done something in a good way that will position me well for the rest of my life, because I've gone past that shiny aura of I am youthful potential and can do anything, to, well, I sure hope that I have done something that demonstrates that I have that youthful potential that everybody talked about. And so he's creeping up on that number. And as I tend to do with all of the friends and collaborators and peers and partners that are nearby, I am very critical of ensuring that, to the best of my ability, I'm helping people such as Callum, and in this case now, all of you, to be thinking about these things in a really serious way. Because if we don't determine where our life is going, someone or something else will. And these are all topics that fall into the realm of authenticity. But one conversation that Callum and I had, I think around sunrise at a festival, was talking about how he was expressing himself in the world and how the struggles that he was having. And we were talking in regards to a partnership that he had been decoupling from and was having trouble with. And we spoke for many hours as the sun came up, and we decided that we weren't going to get to the conclusion that we wanted. And I like to boil everything down into memes. I'll give you an example. One of the, I think basically at this point, my catchphrase would be the question, are you all the way through? And I'll go into it a little bit later. But that gives you an idea of just a very simple statement that means a lot, and I use in instances to call people to attention. And Callum's hat is one of those things that I ended up settling on after the conversation I had with Callum. And HAT is an acronym. It's an acronym for honest, authentic, and true. And a lot of you might be thinking, well, those three words mean the same thing, but not to me. And this is what I broke it down to him after I spent some time and I thought about it. And I said, well, it sounds like you're really struggling with this question of how to tackle the trifecta of these three words and how to best communicate them. So for Callum, it came out as, are you being honest? And honest, I would define as, are you communicating yourself in a way that is honest with the world outside? Am I speaking honesty in the conversations to the people I talk to? And that's very important. I think that there is really no reason ever to lie in a situation, but it happens and it comes up, but we should be thinking about that very critically. And we should be asking ourselves throughout our day and through our conversations, like, am I being honest? Am I speaking truth? That's the third word here, honest, authentic, and true. So a little bit of an overlap, but it's not the same thing. Second word in that acronym would be authentic. And here we land on the very key value of real, authenticity. And authenticity, or in this case, authentic, is the origin. So it's, are you being honest with yourself? Are you being authentic to who you are and what is really right within you? And I really like to look at that word in conjunction with honesty, because I can be speaking honestly, but I can be doing so from an inauthentic place. And so if I'm being honest in a conversation, but I am being inauthentic myself, I am, in some part, kind of lying, because I'm not holding the space for myself in that conversation. So, authentic. Am I being authentic in this conversation? And the last word in the acronym of Callum's hat is true. And, well, what's the difference between truth and honesty? Well, truth, actually I should say true, in this case for me, is more of the idea of, am I being clear and precise? True the way that an arrow flies through the air, right? And so, in addition to being honest, communicating truthfulness to somebody outside of myself, in addition to being authentic and being true and honest within myself, I am also being true in my communication, is that I'm being straightforward. I'm being clear. I'm being precise and concise. Because, as you'll notice, I can toss a whole bunch of words out there, and it seems like, well, here's a guy who's saying he wants to be true, but he's actually looping around and around. But I do this very intentionally. And every word that I try and bring forth ends up being very integral to the message that I'm trying to communicate. And I'll loop a little bit, and I will be somewhat redundant, but that is partially because, in my experience, I'm a pretty smart dude. And you'll see, I'll get into it a little bit later. I'm dealing with my own issues of egotism and all these other things that come up as you find your own confidence and your own clarity. But I want to be as true as I can as I'm communicating these things. And I find that even I'm not going to get it on the first pass. It's like a lot of times, so for instance, you'll meet Chispa at some point, they'll come wandering over. And everyone always says, they're like, wow, what an intelligent dog. Look at that, they're so smart. And what they're perceiving as smart is actually the result of training and a lot of time spent going over a very simple thing over and over and over again to get to a result that appears like, wow, it's just built into you. You're a natural. No, that's a dog. And just like a dog, we can train ourselves and train those around us. So, you'll notice I have a tendency to sort of start wandering on down these little thought patterns, and I find them fun, and hopefully you do too. But training, just in the same way of training Chispa, who is surprisingly absent for the moment, jungling somewhere, just in the same way in which it takes time and patience and consideration to convey a message across species. We don't speak, that dog don't speak English. And so we have to figure out a way to communicate those things. It is equally as challenging, equally as difficult, though we might not think it is, to communicate a message from one person to another. Because while there are a shared language, in some cases, hopefully, if you made it this far, I imagine you're understanding some of what I'm saying. Just because we speak the same language doesn't mean we're actually able to communicate effectively. And this has always been something that's fascinating to me, is that when it comes to communication around something such as authenticity, there are so many ways in which this can go horribly wrong. For instance, I might not have a clear idea internally of what it is I'm trying to say, and I might not even be equipped with the words to say it. So I have to go through the little Rolodex of stuff that I have in my mind. There's a reference that no one's going to get. They're like, what's a Rolodex? Sorry to everybody that was born after the 90s. Used to be a thing. But if I'm going through the catalog of information in my mind, and I'm maybe lacking the language, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to fill in with it. And I might communicate an emotion in such a way that the words that come out of my mouth don't exactly represent what it is that I'm feeling. And so now, I've already sort of translated a little bit incorrectly from my mind into my words. Now, those words then fly across the room, and now they're going to be received, they're going to be heard by somebody else hopefully they're actually heard accurately. I think you've all experienced what it's like to speak on a topic and someone actually just mishears the words that you say, and then all of a sudden you're now suddenly in a fight because what they heard wasn't actually what you said. And so, all right, now we've already run into a barrier. But even if they do hear the exact words that you say, those words do not mean to that person exactly what they meant to you. And so they are then receiving the words that you hear, processing that information, and coming to a conclusion. And that is 4 potential places where we can go awry in a conversation. And that's just inside of a conversation that we're having back and forth around the table. So, long tangent to explain why you might see me loop over stuff. My actual prime mentor, the man who I would say is largely responsible for the man that you're seeing sitting before you today, is Steve Demas. And he's going to hate that I even brought him up, so I'll just try and squirrel him away. But Steve Demas is responsible for my unwavering commitment to right livelihood, which I mentioned we're going to talk about at length in the next episode. And in addition to that, he is also phenomenally good at simultaneously never repeating himself and at the same time going over stuff many, many times to ensure that you really get it. And so we'll come at things from different angles and we'll learn these different lessons together and we'll approach it from the side and the front and the back. And the truth being, in the spirit of authenticity, that what we end up with is the same picture of what we're looking at, regardless of the angle that we approach. And that's part of the idea of diving into these conversations, is like, let's make sure that we're all looking at the same thing. An anecdote that actually comes to mind that I love is that if you had 5 people with their eyes closed, blindfolded, go up and touch an elephant, right? Picture it. Hopefully it's a very nice elephant. Hopefully the elephant has consented. And these 5 people walk up and one person grabs the trunk, another person gets a hold of a leg, one guy grabs the tail, one guy's unfortunate enough to end up more towards the undercarriage, and one guy rests his hand on the belly, and then they all reconvene and they say, okay, what is an elephant? And you are going to get 5 very different descriptions. And so part of the journey that we're on, not only in as far as cultivating authenticity and humanity, but is also going to be helping everybody along the way make sure that we're actually on the same page. Because it can get real confusing for people really quick in small circles. And now here we are, broadcasting out to the ethos, to the universe itself, to all of you sitting, who knows where you're sitting. You're watching us on a phone, you're watching it on top of a mountain, you're listening to it in a podcast as you run down the sidewalk, whatever it is. We're in all these different constructs, and what we'll find is these words will land differently for everyone. And how can we work to the best of our ability inside of the reality that we've been given to make sure that the message that we're conveying is as consistent as it can be. And part of the way that we do that is we come at it from every different angle and we hear how someone responds and they receive it in a way that I never imagined, none of us ever imagined. And we then want to address that and see, okay, so I said this and you heard that and I meant this and it meant that to you. So somewhere along the way, we got a little off track. And herein lies the challenge. So let's step back a little bit here. Real. It's a brand new brand. It's a brand new company. You've already heard a little bit about what it means to us. Values first, movement, and lifestyle hype brand. Interesting set of words. You've already heard what the mission is, cultivating authenticity and humanity. That one hopefully is a little bit more straightforward. And we did not start off with the idea of doing a podcast. That actually, quite honestly, I think kind of came in relatively late in the conversation and came to fruition very rapidly because it became apparent that we needed something between what we were ideating on and where we would end up getting to. Pardon me. I will probably drink more water while filming this podcast than I do the rest of the day. Just like, I'll just use this as a little distraction and a prop. Buy myself some time. But we started originally, and I don't want to give too much away because there's a lot of fun stuff that I want to sort of tease out over a few episodes. But we started originally in a movement-related activity. And we were noticing how it had transpired such that this activity, I'll give a little bit more away. You guys are getting lucky. So we were actually speaking about yoga, and my co-founder, who is not here, but is always here, is Alana Grace, and has been operating as Alana Grace Movement for many years. Very trained, very skilled, very gifted and powerful yoga teacher. And I had the opportunity to do a very basic production of one of her online classes. And I'd already known that she was an amazing person, but the moment that the camera turned on and the moment that the class started, what I immediately bore witness to was that I am watching an artist in their flow state channeling their connection to source. And what came through most strongly for me, goodbye, little bee. What came through most strongly for me in that moment was seeing how much authenticity she was bringing to a practice that, upon review, and after I got really excited and danced around like a little kid, like I tend to do around things that get me excited, like, I don't know, like a really well home-cooked meal. Once I gotten over that initial burst of excitement and thrill, I really started diving in with Alana about like, what is it that you're trying to do here? Because I, quite honestly, don't love going to yoga classes. I really like stretching. But there was something about yoga that always seemed a little off to me. And yoga is one of these ancient practices that has a tremendous amount of history. And once we had a chance to start pulling it apart and teasing it out a little bit, what became apparent is that what we now know as yoga, what we all see as Lululemon pants and classes full of beautiful people doing ridiculous things with their bodies that, quite honestly, make me a little envious and sort of like, I could never do that, is a long way away from what the practice of yoga really stood for originally, as best as I understand, and I'm no expert. But to my limited knowledge, yoga and the physical thing that we understand as yoga commonly today is just this tiny little fragment of what it means to have a yogic practice. And yes, there is the thing that you do with the mat on the ground with the blocks and the straps, and somebody is either gently talking to you about what they're going to do next and now we'll meet in down dog, or they're yelling at you in profanities, whichever particular kink seems to suit you. There is certainly a variety of those things. But what did seem to be apparent once we stepped back and looked at it with this question of authenticity was that we've kind of strayed a long way away from just helping people to be embodied and to find what's right for them and to feel, I think I'm going to do a shout out to Yoga with Adrienne here, is to find what feels good. And so credit to another powerful woman out there in the world who's doing really incredible work to help people understand that, like, yes, here are the positions. And yes, because reality and our society has trained us in this way, we think, oh, I have to do yoga and I have to be down dog like this, and my legs need to be straight, and my back needs to look like that, my butt has to look fantastic. I'm often concerned about how my butt looks, personally. And that has just slowly slipped and crumbled and tumbled its way into what we identified as a barrier between people finding the tools and gaining the opportunity to explore themselves, and has instead become this sort of gap that people have to traverse. You have to be courageous at this point and brave and willing to put yourself out there and look a little bit stupid, because you're going to be new to something and it's going to be different than your body is used to. And all of these things are going to make it feel a little bit harder to get to. And that doesn't seem right. A whole practice based on discovering yourself. And we are putting a barrier between people and discovering themselves of your self-discovery should look this certain way. Well, that doesn't really work. So that was actually the origin conversation of all of Real. And Alana and I think, had that conversation 2 months ago, give or take. Things have moved pretty quickly. And as you'll learn about me, recall is not my gift, and time is this very stretchy, elastic thing that, there's weeks that seem like moments, there's moments that seem like eternities. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. So, give or take a couple months ago or so, and we started getting really excited about it. And things that came out of that are these ideas around what yoga how could we position yoga in such a way that we get past these barriers that have perhaps consciously, but likely unconsciously arose from people grasping so hard at finding their identity in something outside of themselves. And right there, once again, you run into the issue, is that how can I be authentic if I am looking beyond myself for my own truth? That doesn't sit quite right with me. I haven't phrased it that way before. It certainly gets at the point. And so then that becomes a question. Am I to say that you can't find authenticity outside of yourself? Well, no. But I can say that for myself, in my own journey, it's been more of a process of I interact with the world and I engage and I see things outside of myself and I hold them up against what feels right to me. And I go, is this something that is authentically true to me? Is that just something that is authentic and not my truth? Because that's a possibility. I'm obviously a very particular being, with a very particular appearance, and the world reacts to me in a certain way. So things that are true and authentic to me might not resonate. And I can only imagine will only resonate most for people that are coming from a similar place. And so again, we go back to what is authenticity? And the idea that we're going to need your help in figuring that out. And that's what makes it fun. It's really fun to ask a question that you don't know the answer to. You'll come to find that I tend to be very quick with answers and am able to ad-lib a lot of stuff that sounds like truth right out of the gate. But always in that, I'm constantly looking for things that tell me that I am wrong. I have a couple of things I really love. I love being right. I love it when I'm right. Make a call about a meeting before we go in and I tell them the result that I want. And I come out of there being like, yes, I knew it and I love being right. I also love going into those situations thinking I'm right and being completely off base. And then I learn. There is no failure in this process. There is only, it went the way I thought it did, and I get to learn something from that, or it did not go the way I thought it would, and I get to learn something from that. And that is part of my own authenticity. Because I'm not attached to any part of this. There's no conversation that can come up in which I'm like, dang, I thought I had the answer for authenticity, and well, there's a whole bunch of people's opinions that are clearly very valid and it's different than mine. That just simply sparks in me the question of, how better can I understand this? So, real in its entirety, as you're going to come to find over the course of these podcasts, and then as we start to reveal the various different ways in which we approach authenticity, is a giant exploration into the question that's implicit within inside of our mission, cultivating authenticity in humanity. To be totally honest, I've been on meetings all morning of completely different nature. I'm involved in a lot of different organizations, and that takes a lot of brain space. I had a wonderful birthday party here at my house last night, catered by and shout out to what I consider to be the best Indian restaurant I've ever eaten at in my entire life, Little India. Arman, I love you. And we had a great time, and I was up till like 3 with a bunch of people that I love having a conversation just like this one, except it was more, or there was actually a lot of me talking, but there was also other people talking. So a little bit more variety in the conversation. Less of a monologue, more of a discourse. And I was up till 3, and I got maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and I woke up going, wow, I think alcohol is a really weird thing that we permit as the legal substance for release in our current construct of existence, because that one hurts the most. So I woke up a little bit hungover, a little bit later than I normally do, jumped on a bunch of calls, and I was on calls up until the moment I walked over here. And as I was running in and out of my room, and I'm like, I have this call, I have that call, how's it looking? He says, that's great. And I'm just like, all of this needs to be part of it. All of this has to be authentic. And that's part of the reason why, I'm sitting here in my underwear, because that's just what I wear when I'm running around the house. This is how I keep myself. There is no hair department hair. There is no hair department hair. There's no hair department here. And the facial hair configuration, which is certainly going in the direction of Costa Rican Tony Stark, is itself an exploration, which is me being a little bit vulnerable because, quite honestly, I have always referred to myself as having facial mange. And, it's just, I'm just going to give myself a little pat, just say, good job, Ruben. You're putting yourself out there with a whole new look. And, well, hopefully people like it. And if not, well, carry on. Because that's something that I would encourage of all of us, is that if we are not able to, in everything that we do, in every expression of how we're coming off, be authentic to ourselves, then what's guiding us? If we do not determine where our life goes, someone else or something else will. And conversations that we're going to get into later on down the road are things like dun dun dun, social media, and how wildly impactful and I'm going to go ahead and come out and just say diseased that particular thing is, because I've been blessedly busy enough that this little device here that you see staring at me, that's largely probably trying its best to find its way to control my next move, I've been able to use it as a tool. And there have been a lot of times in my life where that thing has used me as a tool. And I have spent way more time than I want to admit scrolling through whatever feed would be available until the point in which it says there's nothing left to scroll through, and I go, give me more. And I've actually come to describe this as essentially the equivalent of handing a mobile bar to an alcoholic. And our conversation from last night, we said, well, why can't we just help people battle with that through discipline? And it's like, yeah, okay, let's take that same idea and apply it back to our mobile bar concept of why don't alcoholics just not do that? And I think in that context, it immediately becomes apparent that there's a lot more involved there. And so you little device, I'm watching you. And social media is one of the things that we're going to talk about at length and will come up often. There they are. There is the puppy. Chispa, the gender fluid dog, formerly known as Chispa, the non-binary dog. But they have many genders. And another topic that we'll get into, because everywhere that we turn now with the eye of what is authenticity, we start to see these weird questions pop up. And we start to see these ways in which that doesn't make sense. This doesn't seem right. There's something inside of me that feels like that doesn't land correctly. And do we need to have the answer to it? No. Is the question that it builds up inside of us important for us to now begin exploring? Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess that was just Chispa alerting us to the fact that something moved in the jungle. So everything's safe here. Worry not. And as we begin to bring out more and more of real, the hope is that you will see something very consistent in what we're doing, which is we take the same question about what is authenticity and how do we cultivate that in humanity, applied to any medium you can possibly think of. So for instance, this little setup here, typically, in my experience, if I've gotten to watch a podcast, and being totally honest, I usually just listen to them as I zip back and forth from whatever I'm doing, or as I frolic around singing off key in my shower. When I've seen them, there's always a big desk, the big headphones, and this fancy microphone, and it seems like there's this special place where people sit, talk about big, important issues. And, well, in my life experience, I can't say I've ever really been in that situation in which those sort of levels of conversations are held in that forum. That is, to me and to us, and what we put together, more than it calls for. What are we trying to do? Microphone. Get the voice and the message across as clearly as we can, with the understanding that even if we get all the audio levels just perfect, the message still has a long way to go to land with you in a way that feels impactful. Additionally, they've got this big desk, and people seem to love desks, especially, and I get to say this as one of them, white men. We love our white desks. We love to sit behind them and feel powerful, and have other people sit on the other side and go, ha ha, I am on the big person side of the desk, and you are just a guest. And that feels wrong. So you'll notice there's no desk between us. There's my little setup over here where I am true to myself constantly burning a bit of incense because why not? In the future, this little iPad will serve as notes, but I didn't prep anything for this particular talk, and I felt that that was perfect as well. So at some point here, when I'm actually having to referencing stuff, I'll look over here, but the screen is black right now, and that's just a prop. So yay, us for making it look like I'm more prepared than I am, but I'm not. So what you're getting is a good old classic Reuben monologue of just what's going through my head right now and always. And then this little monster is actually here because I am in the middle of a bunch of other things, and I let the other teams that I'm working with know that I'm really focused on filming this podcast to get this message out. But I understand that you guys might have what would constitute as an emergency, which is an unfortunate thing in anything that we could ever plan out, because if we're doing a good job planning, those should be pretty far and few in between. And so this device is bridging between a little bit of a lack of planning in some regards and some time-related matters, and that might go off in a moment, and I'll have to go, whoops, but I need you to carry me because my feet have already fallen asleep, so we're going to have to figure that out. I'm not going to be able to move that foot. That will be not good. And so that's kind of what you see. We're just sort of like, hey, this is what it feels like. I could be sitting in a chair. Why would I do that? It's a little bit too formal. If possible, I'd film this on my bed, and then people will be a little bit confused. Is he doing a cam show? Is he doing a podcast? Who knows? I don't know. I'm open to it. People, I've heard a lot of great things about OnlyFans. I'm down. I'm not going to say no. But that was the idea behind the setting, the set. And what you might notice is that we're going to play with the background. This is the studio right here. There's a person sitting here. There's a microphone sort of jammed up as close to my face as we can possibly get it without my attempt at facial hair getting snagged in it. Little room for notes, little ambiance, and the background will change because it's not really the point. And this one's very pretty, don't get me wrong. I'm blessed to live with wonderful people in a wonderful place, and shout out to Costa Rica as my favorite country in the entire world. I highly recommend you come make it down if you can. But you'll see the background change because we're going to try some different stuff, and we'll take this little situation on the road. And in some of the episodes to come, this is the problem I always run into. Is like, if you ever eat dinner with me, what you're going to find is that you will be done with dinner and I will still be talking and have not touched my food. So I'm like, I'm going to drink this water as soon as I find a break in my chance of monologue. Yeah. So what you'll likely see maybe in this episode, if we're feeling ambitious, maybe in future episodes, is the background will change, but the setting will stay the same. And as they've come to find very wonderfully in psychedelic research and studies, is that there's a couple things you really need to make sure you have a good trip. And what is this? But what we're hoping will be a good trip. And what you need is set and setting. And so what you can count on is that the set will stay largely consistent. Maybe there's me. Maybe I have someone else join me. Maybe I have a couple people join me. And the setting will change, but the setting will not differ in what we find as being additive to the experience here. Because yes, you could be listening to this on a podcast service such as Spotify or one of those other ones that we like. And like I said, it tends to be what I do. But perhaps you're sitting in your home, and perhaps your home is surrounded by concrete jungles known as cities. And part of what we wanted to convey in this experience is that there's a lot of different places we can be. And it's really easy, and I have known this very deeply. It's very easy to suddenly find yourself feeling stuck somewhere, and that you've been there a long time, and that you had dreams of going and being in other places and seeing other stuff, and now those dreams are starting to slip away. And hopefully part of what you're getting from this is that those dreams are always going to be as close to you as they were from the very beginning. And it is only our perception of them that is making us feel more distant. And so I think that might be a really nice place to start wrapping up, which is that to say that this is indeed the real life, authentic demonstration of taking a dream from a conversation and an idea and putting that into something that can be experienced, that can be felt, that can be heard, that can be received, that can be misinterpreted, that can be reinterpreted, that can be discussed and debated. And if we left with nothing else from this conversation, what I would hope is that you feel that spark of inquiry of what is authenticity? What is this new group of people that are going to go about asking this question a lot of times. And if you felt so called to jump into the conversation and to see that we can fill a lot of the various components and we can fulfill a lot of the various things that will go into this, and we'll explore it as much as we can, but we will always be limited by our own perspectives, and that we have to have you join us. And so that can be a comment in the YouTube video. That could be joining the Discord group, which, to be totally transparent, is not yet created, but hopefully by the time you see this, will be. And I imagine that there'll be a link somewhere. I don't know how the links work. I'll get used to the thing where I can be like, here's a link, and it'll like pop up in my hand. But for now, I have no idea because I have never done this before. But the main thing is that it's an invitation. It's an invitation to join us on a journey as real as we can make it. And that the more you can be the more you can be involved, the more that you can be involved, the more real it will become. Because we can only represent the life experiences that we've had. And while you'll hear more about them, and they are wild and varied and full of things that seem impossible and fantastical, it is still just the tiniest speck of what all of our experiences represent. And if we're going to actually fulfill our mission of cultivating authenticity in the world and cultivating authenticity in humanity, then it's going to be something that we have to do all together. So, thank you so very much for listening through our first episode of Real Talk. The topic was authenticity. Wanted to introduce you to the idea of real. We've got a bunch more episodes already planned. I think we have 6 or so sketched out. We're going to tackle conversations such as right livelihood, which I mentioned is the other core value of real. We're going to jump right in on some things that are got us all hot and bothered, talking deep on the concepts of masculinity and what's going on there, because that needs to be addressed. I've been inviting some people onto the show. We're going to have a couple of other people who are already involved and are already cooking up some delicious different ways of offering authenticity through a medium other than having a white man sit on a little meditation cushion and speak at length at you. It's in hopes that we can bring other people's perspectives and other people who are attracted to things that aren't just talking into the fold. We're going to have interviews with dear friends of mine. We're going to have talks with people I've never met. Excuse me. We're doing a show here, Jungle. And all along the way, we're going to be looking for your feedback and how we can continue to refine this mission. So thank you so much for taking the time today to listen through this. And we're really looking forward to seeing what you have to say. So drop your comments down below in the YouTube, jump into the Discord. I'm committed to being as active as I can be. And as you can tell, I love to talk. It's one of my favorite things to do. So you want to strike up a conversation? I'm going to jump in there and have it with you. If something didn't sit right for you, I definitely want to hear that. Something really resonated with you? Let's hear that too. But there is no wrong way to approach it. There is only the process that we are all going through to find the truest embodiment of authenticity and how we can then carry that through to the world. Thank you all so much.